Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into a corner of academia that's often misunderstood, the world of adjunct faculty.
It's a fascinating area, especially with all the changes happening in higher ed these days.
Exactly. I mean, you've probably heard the term adjunct professor thrown around, but maybe you're not entirely sure what it means. And why should you even care? Oh, because adjunct faculty are a big part of the higher education landscape. They teach a ton of students.
That's right. And understanding their role is more important than ever, especially with academicjobs.com as our trusty guide for this deep dive. We'll unpack what it really means to be an adjunct.
So let's get right to it. What exactly is an adjunct faculty member?
Well, academicjobs.com tells us they're essentially part-time professors at colleges or universities bringing their expertise to teach certain courses, but it's all on a contractual basis.
Contractual basis. So that sounds a bit temporary, right?
Yeah, it can be. Often these contracts are just for one semester, maybe teaching one or a few courses, and there's no guarantee they'll keep teaching after that.
So it's more about bringing your skills to a specific course for a specific time.
That's a good way to put it. It offers a lot of flexibility for people who have other things going on outside academia.
I can see that. So someone could be a researcher, an artist, or even running their own business and still teach as an adjunct.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance. And speaking of things that are different from being a full-time professor, this brings us to tenure.
Right, tenure. It's like the holy grail for professors, isn't it? Job security, the freedom to research whatever they want, the whole nine yards.
You got it. But tenure is usually reserved for full-time professors. Adjunct faculty don't get that same level of security. Their jobs depend on what the institution needs at the time.
That makes sense. But if their focus is mostly on teaching, what does an adjunct actually do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, they often teach those introductory courses or general education courses, the foundation courses that every student needs. They design the syllabus, create materials, grade assignments, and of course they give lectures.
That sounds like a lot.
It is. They need a bunch of different skills to be successful. Actually, academicjobs.com lists some of those key skills, like great communication skills, being super organized, and knowing how to use technology. That's essential these days.
So it's not just knowing the subject matter. It's also about being able to connect with students and create a good learning environment.
Absolutely. And those skills can be used in a bunch of other professions, which is another benefit of adjunct work.
That's interesting. We've been talking about how it works in North America, but academicjugs.com also mentions adjunct roles in Australia. Is it the same thing there?
Not quite. It's a little different down under. In Australia, the term adjunct is sometimes like an honorary title for people who are experts in their field and contribute to the university, but they're not actually employed by the university. They might give a guest lecture or mentor students.
Oh, so it's more like a recognition of their expertise, not an actual job title.
Right. It just goes to show that adjunct can mean different things depending on where you are.
Okay, so we've learned that adjunct has different meanings. Back in North America, though, is there a difference between part-time faculty and adjunct faculty? Sometimes people use the terms interchangeably.
You're right, it's subtle, but there is a difference. Academicjobs.com actually distinguishes between the two. Both are non-tenure track, but part-time employees usually have a set number of hours they work each week and get paid hourly. Adjuncts, though, get paid based on how many credit hours they teach.
So it's not just about the hours, it's about how much teaching they actually do.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little nuanced, but it affects how much money they make. And while we're talking about different terms, sometimes you'll also hear adjunct lecturer or adjunct instructor.
So professor, lecturer, instructor, it all means the same thing. Part-time, contract-based teaching.
Precisely. It's actually pretty interesting how many different terms there are for basically the same role, and that shows how common this type of position is in higher education.
Now, what about qualifications? What does someone need to become an adjunct professor?
It depends on the school and what level you want to teach. But usually to teach at a university, you at least need a master's degree. Some places prefer a doctorate. For community colleges or technical schools, a bachelor's degree plus work experience might be enough.
So it's not just about having a degree, it's also about having some real-world experience to bring to the classroom.
Exactly. And it's always a good idea to check the specific requirements for the school you're interested in.
Something I saw on academicjobs.com that I found interesting was how adjunct professors have a lot of freedom to create their own teaching schedules. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, that's one of the great perks of being an adjunct. They're not held to the same requirements as tenured faculty, so they have more flexibility to choose which courses to teach and how many. Some might teach just one course a semester, while others might teach several. It just depends on what they want to do and how much time they have.
So it lets them customize their workload and find that work-life balance, which is hard to find in a lot of academic positions.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between sharing what you know and keeping things manageable.
And speaking of sharing knowledge, what are some of the common subjects that adjunct faculty teach? Is it mostly intro courses?
You're right. They often handle those basic courses every student needs. Think like first year writing, intro math, basic science courses, that kind of thing.
So they're laying the groundwork for more advanced courses later on. And I guess the specific subjects depend on what the department needs and the expertise of the available instructors.
You got it. It's a dynamic system, always adapting to the needs of higher education. And this is where academicjobs.com is really useful. It helps match qualified adjuncts with institutions looking for their specific skills.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, in our research, we saw that something like 90% of college faculty are non-tenure track, meaning many of them have other permanent jobs outside of academia. What does that tell us about adjunct work?
Well, it shows that a lot of adjuncts are actually seasoned professionals in their fields. They're not just teaching from textbooks. They're bringing their actual work experience into the classroom.
So it's not just theory. It's about giving students real-world examples and showing them how what they're learning applies outside the classroom.
Exactly. It's like having a successful entrepreneur teach a business course or a working therapist leading a psychology seminar. Students get a taste of both the academic side and the real-world application.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room, money. How are adjunct professors paid?
Most of the time, they're paid per credit hour. So the more courses they teach, the more they make. But the exact amount they get can be very different from place to place. It depends on things like the school, the subject they teach, and how much experience they have.
So unlike tenured professors, they don't have a set salary. But what does that actually look like in terms of take-home pay? It seems like it could vary a lot.
You're right, it can vary quite a bit. And it's important to remember that adjunct professors often don't get the same benefits as full-time faculty. Things like health insurance or retirement contributions are usually not part of the package. So that's something to really think about when considering this line of work.
That's a crucial point. It's all about making informed decisions and understanding the whole picture, even the parts that aren't so great. But let's talk about the good stuff for a minute. What are some of the benefits of having adjunct professors from the student's perspective?
Well, students get a really unique learning experience with adjuncts. They bring in fresh perspectives, sometimes challenge the usual way of thinking, and introduce new ideas from their own careers.
That makes sense. It's not just textbook knowledge. It's showing students how those concepts play out in the real world.
Right. And since adjuncts often have other responsibilities, they tend to be very focused during their class time. They want to make the most of it for the students.
So far, we've heard that adjunct faculty are a key part of higher education, bringing experience and expertise into the classroom.
And even though they face unique challenges, a lot of adjuncts really love shaping the minds of future generations.
It sounds like demanding but rewarding work, with a mix of intellectual stimulation and professional flexibility.
It definitely is. And if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, academicjobs.com is an amazing resource for finding openings.
They've got listings for all kinds of positions, including adjunct roles at some of the best universities all over the world. So whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned professional, there's something there for everyone. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've talked about the rewards, but what about the challenges? What are some of the hard things that adjunct professors often face?
Well, one of the toughest things, and we talked about this a little earlier, is the lack of job security. Adjunct jobs are often temporary, and they can depend on things like how many students sign up for classes or what the university's budget looks like.
So even if you've been teaching the same classes for years and doing a great job, there's no guarantee you'll be back next semester.
That's the reality for a lot of adjuncts, unfortunately. It means constantly applying for jobs and just hoping for the best. That can be pretty stressful.
It sounds like it takes a special kind of person to handle that, someone who can roll with the punches and doesn't mind uncertainty.
You're right about that. And that brings us to another challenge, which is that adjuncts often don't get benefits. Things like health insurance or money put aside for retirement, that kind of thing.
That's a big deal, especially if you're relying on adjunct teaching as your main source of income. It makes planning for the future much harder.
Definitely. And those are just some of the challenges for individual adjuncts. But if we look at the bigger picture, there are also some systemic issues, things about how the whole system works
Hmm.
that contribute to making adjunct work so precarious.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. What are some of the larger trends in higher education that are affecting adjuncts?
Well, one major trend is the rising demand for higher education all over the world. More and more people want college degrees and specialized training. That's great, of course. It means we're creating a more educated society. But it also puts a lot of pressure on universities and colleges. They have to find the resources and the space to teach all these new students.
I see. So universities are trying to keep up with this growing demand, and that means they often rely more on adjunct faculty to save money.
It's kind of a double-edged sword. We want everyone to have the chance to get a higher education, but that can lead to the very problems that make life tough for adjunct professors.
That's a good point. And what about the rise of online learning? How do you see that impacting the future of adjunct work?
That's an interesting one. It has the potential to be both good and bad for adjuncts. On the one hand, online learning could create more opportunities for them. They could teach students anywhere in the world and maybe even make more money because they can teach more students.
So online learning could offer more flexibility and a level playing field in a way.
It could, yeah. But there's another side to it too. The growth of online platforms, like those massive open online courses, could lead to what some people call the gigification of teaching.
Gigification. What do you mean by that?
It's where universities get a few big-name professors to make these online courses, which are often free or very cheap. Then they hire a bunch of adjuncts to do all the behind-the-scenes stuff, like grading and answering student questions, and that could be for thousands of students.
So a lot of work for very little pay.
Exactly. It's a complicated issue that has big implications for the future of teaching as a profession. We definitely need to keep an eye on it as online learning becomes more common.
Awareness is key, for sure. But given these challenges, what can adjuncts do to fight for themselves and for better working conditions?
Well, working together is really important. Adjuncts can join unions, form advocacy groups, and speak out about the problems they face. They can also talk with administrators at universities and try to find solutions that work for everyone.
So strength in numbers and collaboration instead of conflict.
Exactly. It's about working together to create a system that's fair and sustainable for everyone in higher education. And even on an individual level, there are things adjuncts can do to thrive. For example, building strong relationships with colleagues and students can create a real sense of community.
Yeah, community can be so important, especially in a job that can feel pretty isolating sometimes.
Absolutely. Another key thing is to keep learning and developing professionally. Going to conferences, taking workshops, taking online courses, all that stuff can help adjuncts stay at the top of their game.
So it's about investing in themselves and showing that they're committed to lifelong learning.
That's right. And let's not forget, despite all the difficulties, a lot of adjunct professors really love what they do.
Right, it's not all doom and gloom. There are definitely upsides too.
Absolutely. They have the chance to share their knowledge, inspire students, and make a real difference. Plus, they often have the freedom to pursue other interests and passions. And being part of a vibrant intellectual community is something a lot of people find really appealing. For many, the rewards outweigh the challenges.
That's great to hear. It's about finding that balance and focusing on what matters most to you. Now, you mentioned before how adjunct professors often bring real-world experience into the classroom. Can you give us an example of how that benefits students?
Sure. Imagine a student taking a creative writing class that's being taught by someone who's also a published author. The student wouldn't just be learning grammar and writing techniques, but they'd also get insight into the publishing industry, maybe get advice on how to submit their work to agents, or even workshop their writing with someone who's actually been successful in the field.
Wow, that's an amazing opportunity. It's like getting a master class from someone who's actually out there doing it, not just talking about it.
Mm?
And this isn't just limited to creative fields, right?
Not at all. Think about a political science class taught by someone who's worked on a political campaign, or an economics class led by someone with experience in finance. That kind of real-world perspective can really bring a subject to life.
It sounds like adjuncts, with their diverse backgrounds, can also play a big role in making higher education more diverse and inclusive.
That's a great point. They often come from a variety of backgrounds and represent different ethnicities, cultures, and life experiences. That diversity of thought is so important, and it benefits everyone.
So it's about building an academic community that's truly inclusive, where everyone feels welcome and respected.
Exactly. It's about making sure that higher education reflects the diversity of our world.
Now, what advice would you give someone who's listening and thinking, this sounds interesting, maybe I want to try it out? What's the first step for someone who's considering becoming an adjunct professor?
I'd say the most important thing is to do your research. Understand what the job really involves, what the pay is like, and what the challenges are. It's not a decision to take lightly. But if you do your homework and you're still passionate about sharing your knowledge, then start networking. Reach out to faculty and administrators at the schools where you might want to teach. Start building those connections.
Networking is so important in any profession, and it sounds like academia is no different.
It really isn't. And finally, be patient and persistent. Finding an adjunct job can be tough. It takes time to build your teaching experience and establish yourself.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. And speaking of finding opportunities, I have to mention academicjobs.com again. It seems like a fantastic resource for anyone thinking about a career in higher education, whether it's adjunct work or a full-time position.
It really is an invaluable tool. It connects qualified people with institutions that are looking for their expertise. They have listings for all sorts of positions at universities all over the world. It's definitely worth checking out.
I'm getting the feeling that one of the keys to success as an adjunct is finding your niche, that perfect spot where your passions and your expertise line up with the needs of a specific school or community.
You're absolutely right. Higher education is such a vast and diverse field. There are endless opportunities to specialize.
Okay, let's make this practical.
Yeah.
Imagine you're someone who loves a city like Austin, Texas.
Austin, great choice. It's such a lively city, known for its music, its tech scene, and its unique culture.
Exactly. Now, let's say you also have a deep knowledge of history, particularly Texas history. How could you combine those passions and maybe find some fulfilling adjunct work in Austin?
Well, Austin has several great universities and colleges, many of which offer courses on Texas history. You could definitely teach at one of those places, sharing your knowledge with students who are eager to learn about the state's past.
And what about those other passions, music and tech? Would those come into play too?
Absolutely. Austin's music scene is incredible. You could teach music history or even performance-based courses. And with the growing tech industry there, you might be able to teach courses on the history of technology or how technology impacts society.
So it's about being creative and resourceful, finding ways to connect your passions to what a particular community needs.
Exactly. And another great thing about Austin is that the cost of living is relatively low compared to other big cities. That could be a big advantage for an adjunct professor who might not be making a huge salary.
That's a great point. Where you live can really affect your overall job satisfaction. Now, let's go back to those intangible rewards of being an adjunct. What are some of the less obvious perks that people might not think about?
One thing that's often overlooked is the chance to be a mentor. Adjunct professors, with their diverse backgrounds and experiences, can offer students really valuable guidance, especially those who might not have a traditional support system.
So it's about being more than just a teacher, being a trusted advisor who helps students navigate college life and figure out their careers and their purpose.
That's it, exactly. And those mentoring relationships can have a huge impact on students. It's something a lot of adjuncts find really rewarding.
I'm curious, what are some skills that might not be on a typical resume, but are really important for being a successful adjunct?
Hmm. Well, being flexible and adaptable are definitely up there. Adjunct professors often have to teach different courses, sometimes with very little notice. They need to be comfortable switching gears and trying new things.
So being able to handle uncertainty and learn quickly are key traits.
Absolutely. And along with that, strong time management skills are crucial. Adjuncts are often juggling a lot of responsibilities, so being organized and efficient is super important.
I imagine that a passion for teaching is pretty high up on that list too, right?
You're absolutely right. That genuine love for sharing knowledge and seeing students succeed, that's what makes all the difference. And it's that passion that helps you overcome the challenges and find real fulfillment in this work.
It sounds like a tough but ultimately rewarding path for the right person.
It is. And for those who are passionate about teaching and want to make a real contribution to higher education, adjunct work can be an amazing experience.
We've talked a lot about the human side of teaching, but what about technology? It's changing everything about education. How can adjunct professors use technology effectively while also being aware of the potential downsides.
Technology can be an incredible tool for making learning more engaging and interactive. It can also make education accessible to more people, but it's crucial to use it thoughtfully.
So it's not just about using the newest gadgets, it's about using technology in a way that actually helps students learn and builds a sense of community, even online.
Exactly. And it's about being mindful of things like digital equity and accessibility, making sure all students can access the technology and get the support they need.
Speaking of support, what resources are there for adjuncts who might be struggling or feeling isolated?
Well, a lot of universities have centers for teaching and learning, and they often have programs specifically for adjuncts. They offer workshops on things like course design, teaching strategies, and classroom management.
So it's important to seek out those resources and not be afraid to ask for help.
Definitely. And remember, you're not alone. There are a lot of other adjunct professors out there who are going through similar things. Connecting with them, either through official networks or just getting together informally, can create a real sense of community.
It's about building a support system of people who understand the unique challenges of adjunct work.
Exactly. Those connections can be incredibly valuable for sharing advice, resources, and just knowing you're not in it alone.
Now, for anyone listening who's thinking about giving adjunct teaching a try, what's the best way to start exploring opportunities?
Academicjobs.com is a great place to begin. They have a huge database of open positions at institutions all over the world, including tons of adjunct roles.
It sounds like a really user-friendly and comprehensive resource.
It is. And many institutions also list their open adjunct positions on their own websites, so it's worth checking those out too.
And what about networking? You mentioned before that it's crucial in academia. What are some good ways for aspiring adjuncts to connect with others in the field?
Going to conferences and workshops in your field is a great way to meet other academics, including people who could be mentors or collaborators.
So it's about putting yourself out there, having conversations, and building relationships.
That's right. And don't underestimate the power of online networking. Connect with other academics on social media, participate in online forums, and share your work and ideas.
So building your professional online presence and getting involved in those virtual conversations is important too.
Absolutely. And remember, networking isn't just about asking for favors. It's about making genuine connections, sharing your knowledge, and being supportive of others.
It's about building a community. Now, let's talk about the financial side of adjunct work. We talked about the challenges of an inconsistent income and often limited benefits. What are some tips for managing your finances as an adjunct professor?
Well, it's really important to make a budget that's realistic and takes into account the fact that your income might fluctuate.
So being smart with your money and planning for those times when you might not be teaching as much.
That's the idea. And it's also a good idea to explore other ways to make money. A lot of adjuncts have side hustles, like freelance work or consulting to supplement their teaching income.
So being entrepreneurial and having multiple income streams is key.
Exactly. And knowing your worth and not being afraid to negotiate for fair pay is important too.
So it's about being proactive with your finances and standing up for yourself.
Right. And there are resources to help you with all of this. Many universities have financial planning workshops for faculty, and there's tons of information online for freelancers and independent contractors.
It sounds like financial planning is an ongoing process, not a one-time thing.
You got it. It's about being aware of your spending, saving for the future, and always checking in with yourself about your financial goals.
Now, I want to change gears a bit and talk about the importance of finding joy in the journey as an adjunct professor.
That's such an important point. It's easy to get caught up in all the challenges, but we need to remember why we chose this path in the first place. We need to focus on the things that bring us joy and make it all feel worthwhile.
So celebrating those small wins, connecting with students who inspire you, and reminding yourself of the positive impact you're having, those are all important.
Absolutely. And appreciating the unique opportunities and experiences that adjunct work offers. The flexibility, the different perspectives you encounter, the chance to keep learning and growing, those are all valuable parts of the experience.
It's about enjoying the ride with all its ups and downs and finding meaning and purpose in the work itself.
Exactly. Remember, happiness isn't about reaching a destination, it's about how you travel.
Now, as we wrap up this part of our deep dives, let's recap some key takeaways about the world of adjunct faculty.
First and foremost, adjuncts play a vital role in higher education. They bring important expertise and a unique perspective to the classroom.
They make the learning experience richer for students, and often act as mentors and guides.
And while being an adjunct professor comes with its own set of challenges, it can be incredibly rewarding for those who love teaching and are committed to lifelong learning.
It takes resilience, adaptability, and a strong commitment to self-care.
But for those who embrace the journey, it can be a fulfilling and impactful career.
And remember, if you're interested in exploring adjunct teaching, academicjobs.com is a great resource for finding open positions.
They have listings for all sorts of roles at top universities all around the world. So whether you're just starting out or you're already experienced, you'll find something there to catch your eye.
So go for it. Dive in and explore the world of adjunct teaching. You might be surprised by what you discover.
And remember, the future of higher education relies on the hard work and dedication of passionate educators like you.
Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to take a moment to talk about the importance of community for adjunct faculty.
That's a crucial part of thriving in this role. Having a network of colleagues, mentors, and friends who support you can make a huge difference in dealing with challenges and celebrating successes.
So it's about connecting with others who share your values, sharing your experiences, and asking for advice and support when you need it.
Exactly. And it's about building relationships based on mutual respect, trust, and a love of teaching and learning.
So it's about creating a supportive community within academia where everyone feels connected and valued.
Precisely. And remembering that you don't have to do this alone. There are people out there who understand what you're going through and are ready to help.
Now let's talk about the importance of finding your own path as an adjunct professor.
That's a great point. There's no one right way to do this. What works for one person might not work for another.
So it's about experimenting, trying different things, and figuring out what brings you joy and fulfillment.
Exactly. And it's about being open to new possibilities, playing to your strengths, and building a career that reflects your values and goals.
So it's about being your own boss, deciding your own path, and defining success for yourself.
Precisely. And remember, there's no right or wrong way to be an adjunct. The most important thing is to find what works for you and what gives you a sense of purpose.
Now let's talk about staying resilient as an adjunct professor.
Resilience is so important for navigating all the ups and downs of academia.
So it's about being able to bounce back from setbacks, learn from your mistakes, and keep a positive attitude, even when things are tough.
Exactly. And finding healthy ways to deal with stress, reaching out for support when you need it, and keeping your eye on the prize.
So believing in yourself, trusting the process, and knowing you can overcome challenges, that's all part of it.
Exactly. And remembering that setbacks are part of life, and they can actually make you stronger in the long run.
Now, let's talk about staying true to yourself as an adjunct professor.
That's so important for finding fulfillment in your work.
So it's about teaching authentically, sharing your unique perspective, and letting your values guide you.
Right. And it's about not comparing yourself to others or trying to fit into a mold that doesn't feel right.
So it's about embracing what makes you unique, celebrating your strengths, and being confident in who you are as an educator.
Precisely. And knowing that your voice and your perspective are valuable additions to the academic community.
Now let's talk about finding balance in your life as an adjunct professor.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in all the demands of teaching and research, but it's crucial to have a balanced life, both professionally and personally.
So it's about setting boundaries, making time for self-care, and doing things you enjoy outside of work.
Absolutely. It's about taking care of your mind, body, and spirit so you can be the best version of yourself in all areas of your life.
Precisely. And remembering that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's essential for being successful and happy in the long run. Now let's shift gears and talk about financial planning for adjuncts.
That's a really important topic, especially since adjunct income can be unpredictable.
So it's about budgeting carefully, saving for the future, and maybe even finding additional sources of income.
Exactly. And it's about taking charge of your finances, getting financial advice if you need it, and speaking up for fair pay and benefits within the higher education system.
So it's about creating financial security and stability for yourself, even with the ups and downs of adjunct work.
Exactly. And recognizing that financial health is a big part of overall well-being.
Now let's talk about finding joy in the journey as an adjunct professor.
That's a beautiful thought. Adjunct work can be challenging, but it's important to remember why we chose this path and find happiness in those everyday moments.
So celebrating small victories, connecting with students who inspire you, and remembering the positive impact you have on their lives, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And appreciating the unique opportunities and experiences that come with adjunct work, the flexibility, the different perspectives you encounter, the chance to make a difference in students' lives, those are all valuable parts of the experience.
It's about embracing the whole journey, with all its highs and lows, and finding meaning and purpose in the work itself.
Exactly. Remember, happiness isn't a destination. It's about how you get there.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of adjunct faculty, I want to leave our listeners with a feeling of hope and possibility.
That's a wonderful goal. Adjuncts play a vital role in higher education, despite the challenges, and their contributions are so valuable.
They're passionate educators who truly care about sharing their knowledge and inspiring students.
Absolutely, and they bring a unique perspective and expertise to the classroom that benefits everyone.
And for anyone thinking about becoming an adjunct professor, remember that academicjobs.com is a fantastic resource for finding open positions.
It's a great starting point for exploring all the possibilities that are out there.
So go for it. Dive in and discover the world of adjunct teaching. You might be surprised by what you find.
And remember, the future of higher education depends on the dedication of passionate educators like you.
That's a powerful thought. To all the adjunct faculty out there, thank you for your hard work, your commitment, and your dedication to education. You are making a real difference, one student at a time.
And remember, you're not alone. There's a community of support out there, and together we can create a higher education system that is fair and sustainable for everyone.
That's a perfect note to end on. To our listeners, keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and most importantly, never stop learning. Until next time, happy deep diving.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today, haven't we? We've talked about what adjunct faculty actually do day to day, and also about how their role fits into the bigger picture of higher education.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation. We've seen that there are definitely some challenges, but there's also a lot of potential for those who are drawn to this kind of work, the flexibility, the intellectual stimulation, all that. Absolutely. And as we wrap things up, I want to make sure we really highlight those key takeaways for our listeners.
Sounds great to me. Where do you want to start?
Let's go back to the beginning. What exactly is an adjunct faculty member? What makes them different from other professors?
Well, an adjunct is basically a part-time professor. They bring their expertise to teach a particular course or maybe a few courses, usually for just one semester at a time. And they often have real-world experience that they can share with their students, which is something you don't always get from full-time tenured professors.
And that ties into one of the big advantages of being an adjunct, right? The flexibility.
Exactly. Adjuncts often have more control over their schedules, so they can balance teaching with other things they want to do, whether that's research, creative projects, or even another full-time job.
And speaking of other jobs, we learned that a pretty high percentage of college faculty are non-tenure track. So a lot of adjuncts are working professionals in their fields in addition to teaching.
That's right, and that's one of the things that makes their contributions so valuable. They're bridging the gap between the academic world and the real world, giving their students practical insights.
But, like we talked about, this flexibility often comes at a cost.
Yeah, that's the tough part. The lack of job security and benefits, that's one of the biggest downsides of being an adjunct. It can make it harder to plan financially and to build a long-term career.
And that's definitely something that we need to address as a society as we think about the future of higher education.
Absolutely. We need to find ways to make things more equitable and sustainable for everyone who's involved in education, including adjuncts.
Now, earlier we talked about how online learning is changing things, and it presents both opportunities and challenges for adjuncts. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. On the one hand, online learning can give adjuncts the opportunity to reach more students, maybe even teach students all over the world. And it can be more flexible in terms of when and how the courses are taught, which is helpful for those who have other commitments.
But there's also the risk that online learning could lead to what we call the gigification of teaching, right?
That's right. There's a worry that universities might start relying too much on just a few famous professors to create these massive online courses, while using a whole bunch of adjuncts to do the less exciting work, like grading and providing student support, all for very little pay.
It's a complicated issue that we really need to pay attention to, especially as online learning keeps growing.
I agree. It really highlights how important it is for us to stand up for fair treatment of all educators.
Now, throughout this whole deep dive, we've been talking about academicjobs.com as a resource for anyone who's interested in adjunct teaching. Can you remind our listeners why this platform is so valuable?
Of course. Academicjobs.com is like a central hub for finding open positions in higher education, and that includes tons of adjunct roles. It makes the job search so much easier. People can create profiles that show off their skills and experience, and then search for jobs that match what they're looking for.
So it's a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to become an adjunct, connecting them with institutions that need their specific skills.
Exactly. If you're ready to take the plunge, that's a great place to start.
Okay, before we say goodbye, I want to give our listeners a few practical tips for success as an adjunct professor.
Let's do it. What are your top tips?
Well, first and foremost, be prepared, do your research, understand what the job really entails, what the pay and benefits or lack thereof are like, and be realistic about the challenges involved.
Great advice. And don't be shy about networking. Reach out to faculty and administrators at schools where you might want to teach. Those connections can be really helpful.
Absolutely. And remember, patience and persistence are key. Finding the right adjunct position takes time and effort. Don't give up.
That's so true. Don't get discouraged if you don't get the first few jobs you apply for. Just keep honing your skills, growing your network, and putting yourself out there.
Now, for those who are already working as adjuncts, what are some things they can do to really thrive in this role? It's demanding, but it can also be so rewarding.
Well, it's all about balance, right? Embrace the flexibility that comes with being an adjunct, but also set clear boundaries for yourself. Being good at time management and staying organized are crucial when you're juggling multiple teaching assignments and other responsibilities.
And never, ever underestimate the importance of self-care.
Yes. Take care of yourself physically and mentally. Make time for things that bring you joy and help you recharge. It makes a world of difference.
And find other adjuncts to connect with. Build a community of support, share resources, and learn from each other's experiences.
That's right. Remember, you don't have to go through this alone.
This has been such a great conversation. To our listeners, whether you're just thinking about becoming an adjunct or you're already part of this amazing community, we hope this deep dive has given you some helpful insights and maybe even some inspiration.
I hope so too. The world of higher education is constantly changing, and the role of adjuncts is more important now than ever before.
And for those who are looking for the next adventure in academia, don't forget to check out academicjobs.com. Top universities, both local and global, post all sorts of exciting opportunities there, including lots of adjunct positions. You might find your dream job.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep sharing your knowledge.
That's a great way to put it. Until next time, everyone, happy deep diving.